Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Deuteronomy chapter 24. Moses is standing at the edge of the Promised Land, and he's reminding all of the people to obey God's instruction in every aspect of their lives. And here he gives instructions about family life and taking care of the poor. In all aspects, we are to reflect the love and forgiveness and mercy that God gave to us, all the while not turning a blind eye to the evil, injustice, and oppression of the world. Under Jesus today, we need to strive for these same values, these same outcomes in our lives and in our societies. And if you want to join this community of Christ followers studying the Bible together, then like and subscribe and leave a comment or a question below. I'd really like to see it. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out from his house, and she leaves his house and goes and becomes another man's wife, and if the latter husband turns against her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away is not allowed to take her again to be his wife, since she has been defiled. For that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance. So this law permits divorce with some restrictions. Once you've already divorced a particular partner, you are not allowed to remarry them again under any circumstances. Right? It allows for safety because relationships in an imperfect world are themselves imperfect. But it also makes sure that marriage continues to be a serious covenant. After all, there was some reason that these two hypothetical people got divorced, and so good things would probably not happen if they were to get remarried again. Now, the wording here is admittedly pretty vague. Divorces are only allowed when one partner finds indecency in the other. But what is indecency? There was actually a really big debate about this in first century Israel during the time of Jesus. There were some sects of the Jews who believed that indecency only referred to cases of adultery, whereas others believed it could be applied to any minor grievance or annoyance. And we know which side of the debate Jesus landed on because he told us in Matthew 19. Jesus maintained that marriage relationships were holy and important. They were ordained and orchestrated by God himself. And so divorce should only ever be pursued in very extreme circumstances, like that of adultery. For Jesus, it was all about returning to the Eden ideal. What God has joined together, well, let no man tear that asunder. Therefore, men and women need to be united in partnership as images of God, ruling and reigning over God's creation, listening only to his wisdom. When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out with the army, nor be charged with any duty. He shall be free at home 1 year, and shall give happiness to his wife whom he has taken. Now this commandment was originally given in Deuteronomy 20, which was all about the laws for warfare, but now it's repeated for this section on marriage and family life. Men who have just been married are exempted from military service, even at this point in history, when the Israelites were a small nation, and their army was only made up of runaway slaves. But in God's eyes, pursuing the blessings and joy of a marriage relationship are just as important as any militaristic endeavor. And by letting these exemptions through, the people show their confidence that God will fight on their behalf, even if the numbers aren't in their favor. No one shall take a hand mill or an upper millstone in pledge, for he would be taking a life in pledge. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we actually have a system that looks a lot like this today. When someone owed you money on a loan, you had the right to take a pledge from them, something valuable that you could keep until they gave you the money that they owed. And today we call that repossessing collateral. But one thing you were not allowed to repossess were hand mills and millstones. That's what people used to grind up their flour when baking bread. This law says that repossessing those things from people would be the same thing as repossessing their life. They could starve to death if you took that from them. And especially for the most poor in Israel, those millstones might have been the only thing people had to provide food for themselves. So in circumstances like these, the lenders were to show compassion. This law ensured that they valued this person's life and ability to feed themselves more than they valued the money that was owed to them. If a man is caught kidnapping any of his countrymen, of the sons of Israel, and he deals with them violently or sells them, then that thief shall die. So you shall purge the evil from among you. The law is strongly opposed to kidnappers, and this command was repeated from Exodus 21. This would, of course, include our modern understanding of kidnapping, like taking a person for the purpose of ransom money, but for this culture and setting, it probably looked more like what we would call human trafficking today. This is evil, despicable behavior, and God demands that these people be put to death. In carrying out the death penalty for these slavers, the sin is atoned for. The evil is purged from the land, and God will forgive the community. Be careful against an infection of leprosy, that you diligently observe and do according to all that the Levitical priests teach you, as I have commanded them. So you shall be careful to do. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way as you came out of Egypt. You might remember from Leviticus that there is a whole section on what the priests are supposed to do with infections of leprosy. And since the priests had been properly trained on how to diagnose, treat, and cleanse these infections, the people likewise are instructed to listen to the commands of the priests. This will limit infectious diseases from spreading through the community and protect everyone from sickness and death. Moses prompts the people to remember what happened to Miriam with her infection of leprosy, as recorded in Numbers 12. After envying for Moses' position, Miriam was cursed with leprosy, but she was healed after humbling herself and yielding to God's instruction. She quarantined, and she followed the commands of the high priest, who happened to be Aaron, her brother. And so all of the generations from here on out are instructed to follow Miriam's example if they want to be healed of their leprosy and limit the infection from spreading to the community. When you make your neighbor a loan of any sort, you shall not enter his house to take his pledge. You shall remain outside, and the man to whom you make the loan shall bring the pledge out to you. If he is a poor man, you shall not sleep with his pledge. When the sun goes down, you shall surely return the pledge to him, that he may sleep in his cloak and bless you, and it will be righteousness for you before the Lord your God. And so here we have more commands on how and when and why to repossess property as a pledge to pay back a loan. Lenders are not allowed to force themselves into anyone's home to take anything from them forcibly, and they are also not allowed to keep anything overnight if they have taken it from a poor person. This is elaborated from Exodus 22, because theoretically the only thing a person this poor would have as a pledge would be their own clothes. The outer cloak was supposed to be returned to these people every night so that they wouldn't have to sleep in the cold. And their inner tunic, according to that Exodus passage, was never supposed to be repossessed at all. Again, this shows that you value the lives of your brothers and sisters more than you value the money owed to you. You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your countrymen or one of your aliens who is in your land in your towns. Ye shall give him his wages on his day before the sun sets, for he is poor, and sets his heart on it, so that he will not cry out against you to the Lord, and it becomes sin in you. For poor hired workers, Moses also commands that their wages be given to them per diem, whenever they leave for the day, not whenever their contracted tenure is over. This again is done to show compassion to the poor, giving them money to buy food that they need every day, and not using your power over them as a way to exploit them into doing what you want. God, in fact, warns the people not to oppress the poor that are working for them, because those poor workers might cry out to God against the oppression of their boss. And we know what God does when the oppressed cry out to him. In Exodus 2, we heard God hear about the oppression of the Israelites. And all those things that God did to the Egyptians because of their oppression, God will do to these Israelite oppressors too. Fathers shall not be put to death for their sons, nor shall sons be put to death for their fathers. Everyone shall be put to death for his own sin. God also instructs that everyone is held responsible for their own sins. Sons are not responsible for the sins of their parents, or vice versa. Of course, this aligns with other scriptural passages like Ezekiel 18 and John 9, But on the other hand, there are also verses found in places like Exodus 34, where God says he will visit the iniquity of fathers on their sons to the third and fourth generations. So what does that mean? Well, think about how life works. I can't choose who my parents are. I can't choose what they did before I was born. But nevertheless, the outcome of my life, and especially the outcome of my childhood, is heavily dependent on those choices that they made. Is it fair? No, not at all. That's just the way life is in this broken creation. And while the sinful choices of parents will inevitably impact their children, the iniquity will be visited on them, those kids are not going to be judged or condemned because of the iniquity of their parents. You shall not pervert the justice due an alien or an orphan, nor take a widow's garment in pledge. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I am commanding you to do this thing. Continuing, God demands that justice not be withheld from immigrants, orphans, or widows, those who were the most socially vulnerable in this society. It would be very easy for the rich and powerful to take advantage of these people, and it would be very easy for others to look the other way when that happens. But all Israel, the leaders and the commoners, are instructed to take care of the least among them. Why? Because God cares about them, because he created them. And all Israel should know what this is like. They are a nation of former slaves. To ignore showing God's grace to others, they would have to forget their own past. When you reap your harvest in your field, and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not go over it again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. You shall remember you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore I am commanding you to do this thing. Finally, we get more instructions about gleaning, leaving the leftovers of your harvest for the poor in your community. Laws like this were also given in Leviticus 19, and all farmers were instructed to do it, whether you produced grain or olives or grapes. And so taken all together, the instructions in this chapter create empathy for the poor. And by the way, that's not just motivated by individual, spontaneous compassion, right? These are systems of societal empathy that are put into place. God cares about these people, and so we need to as well. Whether it's divorce or repossession or gleaning, in all things we need to treat people with the respect, love, and dignity that they deserve as fellow image bearers. And we do that all while not turning a blind eye to terrible crimes like human trafficking or the exploitation of the poor. And so all of these laws point to countercultural grace and mercy shown even to outcasts. But are we reflecting these same sentiments in our lives today? What about in our church or in our culture? Thanks for watching 1189. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a good day. God bless, stay safe, and we'll see you later.